Donald Trump's poll numbers have started to sink, but is this really the dire situation the media wants us to believe it is, or is there something else going on? And this is exactly what we're going to be discussed with Mark Halperin and the crew over here on Two Way. But before we begin, don't forget to like and comment on this video so we see the algorithms. Here we go.
3 polls are out today from reputable, some people might pronounce it reputable organizations, looking at the president's standing. I'll say overall, his job approval on a lot of issues is piss poor, including on issues where he's historically done quite well. That having been said, one of my favorite journalistic phrases, his overall rating in 2 of the 3 polls is just fine. So here's the Wall Street Journal headline on their poll. Resilient, Trump lifted by improved view of the economy. Journal poll finds the president's job rating holds steady despite dim views of his tax and spending law, tariff policies, and the government's handling of Jeffrey Epstein. In the Journal poll, the president's job approval is 46%, which, as Bill McIntyre, friend of Two Way, points out, is the new 56. In other words, in the polarized negative environment in which presidents operate now, a 46% job approval rating ain't bad. And as the journal write-up says, the one thing that probably is sustaining the president's job approval above his approval on individual issues is the people's view on the economy is more upbeat than it's been. Gallup also polled yesterday, 104. There's the economic number from the Journal. Gallup, you see there, his job approval amongst Republicans is still sky high because he's not yet shot anybody on Fifth Avenue. Amongst independents, it's 29. Amongst Democrats, 2%. Kind of incredible, 2%. But the overall is 37. 37 and 46, as Billy Crystal character said on Saturday Night Live. Big difference with that. So if his job approval is really 37, that's horrendous. If it's 46, again, he's never gone much higher than that. So who's going to break the tie? Well, it's Emerson, 105. The Emerson poll has it at 46 also. So, Dan, does it matter if it's 46 or 37? And should we assume it's closer to 46 because 2 of the 3 polls say that? Or that's not how polling works?
No, I think, look, you try to take averages, and I think it was a divided country. It is a divided country, and at least in the foreseeable future, I think we're going to remain a divided country, which is to say he is going to trade in a narrow band. He's not going to get too high. He's not going to get too low. As you look at the midterms, yes, he personally is remaining relatively popular. The issues that he's passed or enacted or fought for right now are largely not popular. And it's going to come down to whose base is more motivated. Today, our base, at least in polls, is more motivated to turn out than Republicans. So can they change that? And independents, right? It's not either or, Mark, as you like to say, it's both. And right now, independents don't love him and they don't love his agenda. So, we'll see. He's focused on it.
Sean, Dan talked about the narrow band. I mean, 37 is about as low as the president gets, and yep. 46 is about as high. So that's the whole band right there. If you were briefing the president today and he said, hey, Sean, I heard there's 3 new polls out. What do they show? What would you say?
Well, one, your strength among Republicans continues to be rock solid. There's a little erosion on the independents, but generally you continue to get high marks all around. To Dan's point, look, you get 2% from Democrats. That might even be high. But it doesn't track. I mean, look, I'm not one of these people, but one, I think there's an outlier, clearly, that's obvious. And it doesn't surprise me. But if you do look overall, not just at those 3, but the past couple weeks, that's generally where he is, in that mid to upper 47. But it's also the context that you're for him, with everything that's going on, I'd be excited about it. I think his strength among the base, which is what he really cares about, is massive. There's zero erosion there. Most of the folks that voted for him are still with him. There's not seeing any of this erosion. But I will just say this anecdotally, and I'm not a big fan of this. I mean, it's like, telling someone in a campaign about yard signs. It drives me nuts. But I will say that having lived, the lived experience of this after term 1 at the end of a year and where we are now is vastly different. At the end of the midpoint of the first year to the end, it was uncomfortable. I still get stopped by, people all like on a daily basis, love Trump. If you're still talking to Trump, tell him he's doing a great job. That's so the support among average everyday Americans is vastly better than where it was in his first term. And there's general agreement. I don't think you're ever going to win over the Democrats. So that being said, I think he's in a very good position. And I actually think, frankly, considering what we've talked about, the stories that have dominated versus the accomplishment and results that he has gotten, hopefully at some point we'll start to push through. And so I actually think it'll climb.
So let me start by saying this. I am not here to blow smoke. I'm here to try to be as truthful as possible in the stories that I find entertaining and am reporting on, okay? And this whole idea of polling, I do, of course, want to remind everybody that a lot of these leftist institutions that do polling try to use it to shape public opinion, not necessarily reflect it. Okay, but why do I think these numbers coming out from Emerson and the Wall Street Journal are a little bit accurate? Well, that's because it's corroborated with Rasmussen. Rasmussen has been very spot on when it comes to tracking Donald Trump's approval, specifically back during the 2024 election. And right now, you'll notice they have him at 48%. And that kind of coincides with the other two polls. Now, Gallup is a huge outlier with a 37% approval, right? That's just insane, and we should probably treat it as such. But the good news is that Donald Trump traditionally polls low, and of course, the Republican base has not abandoned him, right? He's at or above about 90%, which is a remarkable feat, especially given all of the negative press coverage. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And one other thing I want to mention here is that, yes, even from the Associated Press, about 6 in 10 people say that Donald Trump is capable of getting things done, and about 56% say that Donald Trump understands the problems facing people like you. So yes, Donald Trump still has a connection with your average everyday American, and guess what? They view him as actually being able to accomplish a goal. And this, of course, is also reflected over here in the Wall Street Journal poll, as was mentioned. The amount of people that actually think the economy is in a positive light, look at this compared to Joe Biden, right? Less than 40% in 2022, and it never really broke that until Donald Trump came into office, and all of a sudden we have this skyrocket. Now, it's still not above 50, but 47% is a heck of a lot better than 38. So what do I think is personally holding Donald Trump back? Well, first of all, it's the whole tariffs situation, right? I agree with the tariffs. I think it's a great idea because it proved to be very beneficial in his first term. However, it's not been very good messaging. It hasn't been consistent, and it's been dragging on for months. Donald Trump should have slapped the tariffs on, done all the negotiations, and hopefully had all of this finished by now. But then again, I'm not dealing with world leaders, so what the heck do I know? The second thing, of course, is immigration. It seems like the left has really taken control of the immigration narrative. And even though this is one of Donald Trump's most popular positions, it seems like now it's kind of dragging a little bit because there's so many fake stories out there about Donald Trump breaking up families, arresting abuelas, masked people coming out in the middle of the night to, of course, make people disappear, which is all a bunch of garbage. And even though Tom Homan is actually out there making very good cases and arguments by appearing on all of those shows, the message isn't quite sinking through with the independents and Democrats. And last, of course, is the Epstein situation. Donald Trump has really kind of fouled this one up in a big way, because whatever you think about it, Donald Trump's response should have just been to either let the DOJ handle it or to say, guess what? I'm going to release everything, and then it's over. It's no longer a talking point for the left. And that's honestly what I think he should be doing. So when you combine all of these factors together, of course, you're going to have a lot of independents kind of fall off because, as I mentioned a moment ago, Republicans still have very high support for Donald Trump. And the reason that could be is because we all recognize the bias in the media. All right, we recognize the bias in the polling. We recognize that we're trying to be sold a story right now. So we're all used to all of this garbage because it's what the media has been doing for decades. However, the independents, they are not used to it and are therefore much more susceptible to the influence by the lying mainstream media. All right, so that, of course, is why you're going to have this discrepancy, incredibly high support among Republicans and yet really low support among independents. And all of those issues I mentioned previously are not helping. So Donald Trump, of course, needs to go ahead and squash those outright. And the best way to go about doing that is to make the country successful, right? As Seanspicer mentioned at the very end, as soon as Donald Trump's policies start to kick in, start to take effect, and people see those effects reflected in their everyday lives, that's when his poll numbers will shoot back up. It's just a question of when is that going to happen? And the faster Donald Trump acts, the faster Congress acts, the faster we will get those results. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and say hi to your mom for me. Before you go, I do want to point out that this is one of the new amazing shirts you can buy to help support this channel, so make sure you go ahead and check the link in the description.